ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to be engaged with the words of Torah. O Lord our God, we ask that you make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouth of your entire people, the house of Israel. May we, our descendant and the descendant of your people, the house of Israel, know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, O Lord, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. Blessed are you, O Lord, King of the universe, who chooses us from all the people and gives to us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, who gives us the Torah. Another announcement is that this book we talked about at Torah Club is in the library from Sabbath to Sabbath. Okay, so today we're going to touch on something called the building the wall of Jerusalem. This week in the Parsha, we read about a tragic event, the death of Nadab and Abihu. When this story is read every year, it leads to discussions around the issue. What is it? Why they died? Why was God so upset? So I propose a view of this in that Friday newsletter, which you got yesterday morning and might get again Monday. But for now, what I would like to do is I would like to look at Aaron's reaction. So here the text tells us, why didn't you eat? That's from Leviticus 10, 17 to 20. Now, let's go to the next one. Leviticus 10, 6 to 11. Aaron, to better understand Aaron's answer to Moshe as he looked for the burnt offering, let's look at the instruction given to Aaron and his sons right after the death of Nadab and Abihu. You see, at the end of Leviticus 10, verse 17, Aaron says, Moshe asked Aaron, why didn't you eat the sin offering in the area of the sanctuary, since it is especially holy? Why didn't he eat it? He gave it to you. He gave it to you to take away the guilt of the community, to make atonement for them before Adonai. And you didn't do it. You didn't do the whole thing. Look, its blood wasn't brought into the sanctuary as I ordered. Aaron answered Moshe, even though they offered the sin offering and burnt offering today, things like this have happened to me. If I had eaten the sin offering today, would it have pleased Adonai? On hearing this reply, Moshe was satisfied. So, in the morning, Aaron loses two sons for whatever reason, okay? He loses two sons. In the evening, there is a ritual that he did not accomplish, and he says it's because of what happened. So, to better understand that, we've got to go to Leviticus 6 through 11. Right after the death of Nadab and Abihu, Moshe told Aaron and his sons, right after their death, the death of these two boys, Moshe tells Aaron and his two other sons, he says, don't unbind your hair or tear your clothes in mourning, so that you won't die and so that Adonai won't be angry with the entire community. Rather, let your kinsmen, the whole house of Israel, mourn because of the destruction Adonai brought about with fire. So, he told him not to do that. Then he continues, he says, moreover, don't leave the entrance of the tent of meeting, or you will die, because Adonai's anointing oil is on you. Then he continues and says, Adonai said to Aaron, don't drink any wine or other intoxicating liquor, neither you or your sons with you, when you enter the tent of meeting, so that you will not die. This is to be a permanent regulation through all your generations, so that you will distinguish between the holy and the common, and between the unclean and the clean, and so that you will teach the people of Israel all the laws Adonai told them through Moshe. So here's the schedule of Leviticus 10, okay? There is a big offering and everything is great. Then the two sons of Aaron come and offer what's qualified as an unauthorized offering, and the anger of Hashem comes out. Burn them. Then Moshe goes to Aaron and says, look, there's some things you can't do. And he gives him a laundry list of things not to do. So that's what he does. Oh, not too far. So so the instructions that he told them were all instructions of things you do when you mourn. When you mourn, when people mourn, they untie their hair. Why? Because it shows you're sad. When you're sad, when you lost, you don't spend time primping yourself. You know, you're so sad, you don't even care. So basically it was a thing. They let their hair loose. Today it's to leave your hair loose. Many people do that. But in those days you didn't do that. Your hair was somehow covered, or there was something they did with their hair, or you didn't wear your hair like that. So that was a sign of mourning. You don't even comb your hair, don't wash your hair. You just, that's what it says. Then then he said, when people mourned, they left whatever they were doing. That's why he says, don't go out. So they left whatever they were doing. Oh, my son died. I'm just scared. I'm just going to go and cry. I'm going to go mourn. That's why he says, keep your hair untied. Don't go out of the sanctuary. And then don't even drink liquor. The idea was that today we have the idea of drinking wine is for party, happiness. But when people drank, the idea that in that culture, when people drank a glass of liquor, in that time of mourning, it means it's a thing of comfort. Okay? They have a drink, I want to have a drink because I'm sad. So the instructions that he gave his sons was, do not do the things you do when you mourn. Do you understand that? Do not do the sons die, and then Moshe says, look, do not do the things, because Hashem's not happy when you do that. It's forbidden. So now we can understand Aaron's answer. He did not want to eat the sacrifice. Now, I'm going to let Daniel Lancaster answer why. I have a paper here with a very good explanation. If I can find it, I'll be really good. If I can find it. that explains why we don't do it if we can do it. And if I can't, oh, here it is. So, here's how he explains it. I like how he explains things better than me. He says, Moshe reminded the bereaved priest, Aaron and the two other sons, of their responsibility to conclude the sacrifices by eating the priestly portion. It's part of the thing. They were supposed to eat part of it, and it's part of the ritual. The grain offering and the sin offering on behalf of the nation. It was fulfilling the atonement. When the priest ate this part of the certain parts of the offering, it fulfilled the whole atonement for Israel. You've got to do it. You know, I know a rabbi, he's vegetarian. So one of his congregants, an older lady, she always tells him, what would you do if you were a priest? Because that rabbi is actually a Kohen. If he were in Israel and there was a temple, he would be qualified to be a priest. And she always tells him, what would you do if you had to do that? He said, oh, he never answers the question. Because it's something you have to do. Yeah. So the priest portion from the peace offering could be eaten outside the sanctuary, so long as they ate the breast and the thigh of the peace offering in a ritually clean place, in a state of true purity. They did not need to even eat it inside the tabernacle. Okay. So, and what did that mean? But Aaron and his sons had no appetite for the goat of the sin offering. They didn't feel hungry. They said, oh boy. So Aaron, what he did, he said, instead of sitting down and eating a meal, he said, let's burn it on behalf of the nation. You know? So Moshe, in Leviticus, Moshe, he says, where is that thing? We're supposed to be eating it. Where it is. Aaron responded critically. He said, behold, this very day, the Israelites presented their sin offering and burnt offering before the Lord. But these things happened to me today. I lost my two sons. Okay? If I'd eaten a sin offering today, would it have been good in the sight of the Lord? He's asking, would it have been good for me to do that? What he means really is that Aaron knew that the priest could not perform the ritual in a state of mourning. Aaron was a human being like all of us. He lost his two sons that very morning. You know, he could not perform the ritual in a spirit of joy like it's supposed to be done. So, because the sacrificial services were to be carried out with joy. Though he might conceal his grief by not engaging in mourning rituals, he might conceal it, you know, say, let's burn it, you know. He could not artificially generate the joy required as he performs the ritual of eating the meat of the sin offering. And Moshe accepted the explanation. So you see, so what happened in that chapter in Leviticus 10, they do a great inauguration of the priesthood. Everything's working perfectly. Two sons do a boo-boo, whatever that boo-boo is, and provoke the anger of Adonai. They die. But they're in the middle of a big service. They can't leave. Aaron and the other two sons can't leave just because, well, we're stuck now. They're carrying the weight of the nation upon them. They can't. You know, they take the responsibility very seriously. It's the inauguration of the whole priesthood of Israel. It's like they just can't go. You know? So they say, well, I may not be able to do that. So they waited and said, well, I can do that. But they were not going to be pretending. He was not going to be pretending. It would almost have been bad, actually. You know? So he did plan B. Plan B. And Moshe had not realized that, and Moshe accepted it. Does that make sense? You know? But I think that teaches us a lot about our service. We're human. We're human. You know, I think we can compare it as a let's say we're an official of some sort and something happened. Or we're in the middle of the inauguration of something. We just can't leave. Sometimes there are things that we just have to. If we were responsible leaders, we have to keep to our responsibilities and mourn afterward. It doesn't mean we're not sad. You know, maybe there's a big inauguration, you know, and we have to go through the whole things. I'm going to be sworn in, blah blah blah, you know. And I might go through the whole thing, but I'll skip the banquet afterward. Right? I'll skip the banquet. You know. So that's what happened. Now, this idea of not being sad before the Lord was very important. It was very important. You know. Oh, one more thing I want to show you. You can see on the screen Leviticus 10:16. Okay? In Hebrew, when you want to say good, you say tov. Can you say tov? Tov. When you say very good, you say tov, tov. When you repeating the word gives emphasis. We can see Yeshua who says, verily, verily, I say unto you. A repetition of a word, it's like saying very. So when he says, then Moshe carefully investigated. The word investigated is drash. Anybody who has taken Hebrew with me can see that word drash. It's a dalet, a resh, and a shin. Okay? Anybody who's taken Hebrew with me. A dalet, a resh, and a shin. You know, so, and if you notice in the verse, in Hebrew it's written twice. Drash, drash. That means, drash means investigated. He says it twice. Carefully, he really got into it. You know, he really did. Okay, do you understand? Now, in the Hebrew Bible, in between these two words, which mean investigated carefully, is the exact center of the text of the Torah. It's the middle word, right in between these two drash.
Okay, explain that in between.
In between these two words, drash, is the middle of the text, counting all the letters.
The middle of the text
of the Torah, of the 5 books. It's the exact middle. So I heard a Messianic teacher teach one time, you know, the searching for the sin offering is at the heart of the Torah. But the sin offering is Yeshua. You know, searching Yeshua in the Torah is at its heart. So I thought that was interesting. Now, the idea of not being sad before God was very important. A priest has to do his service. And it was even like this with the kings. And when I read that story where Aaron Aaron had to not show his sadness during service. He couldn't do, oh Lord, you're so good. Couldn't do that, you know. You can't do that. There is a story similar to that in the Bible, which is in the book of Nehemiah. So we're going to go into that story. I'm going to segue that and go into that story. Okay? So, and the story is in the book of Nehemiah. And I'm going to read from Nehemiah 1. You see, Nehemiah was one of the Judean captives in Babylon.
His job was to taste the wine of the king to make sure he didn't get poisoned. What a job. That's how they kill. You know, kings, sometimes they used to take a little bit of poison every once in a while, so they would develop antibodies against the poison. So that if somebody gave them a lethal dose, at least it would not kill them. You know, so they used to do that. But they also had people who tasted whatever they're going to put in their mouth. They have somebody who tasted wine or food. And Nehemiah was a wine tester and a wine server. So he came before the king with the wine, and he had tasted it. What a job. So in Nehemiah 1 through 4, it says, it was in the month of Kislev in the 20th year. Kislev is winter, January. It was in Shushan, the capital, that Hananiah, one of my kinsmen, came out of Yehuda with some men and asked them about the remnants of the Judeans who had escaped the exile and about Yerushalayim. You see, Nehemiah loved the city he came from, Jerusalem. The king had already given the order to return to Jerusalem. And, sorry, did something wrong. Here we go. He had already given the order to return to Jerusalem. So, the king, you remember he said, all the captives from Judea, you can go back home. It was the end of the exile. Not everybody went back. Some first people went back. Okay? So, but Nehemiah was still there. He had a good job with the king, and so he's still there. But caravans were traveling back and forth. So every time a caravan came, he went to get some news. So what's happening in Jerusalem? What? You know, what's happening? And he was sad. He said, the remnant of the exile lives there in the province are in great distress and are held in contempt. The wall of Yerushalayim is in ruins, and its gates have been completely burned up. On hearing this answer, I sat down and wept, Nehemiah says. I mourned for several days, fasting and praying before the God of heaven. So Nehemiah was sad because of what happened. But came time to serve the king. It was forbidden to be sad in the presence of the king. You see the idea that you're the king and somebody comes to serve you and everybody says you're sad, that means the king is bad. You know, a king is supposed to be benevolent. He's good and he makes your life happy. If you look sad, it's a bad reflection on the king. That was the whole idea. So it was the same for God. It was the same for serving an earthly king too. It was the same idea as with Aaron. Okay? So here, it says in Nehemiah 2, verse 1 through 8, you know, it happened that I took the wine and brought it to the king. Prior to that, I had never appeared sad in his presence. Oops! He looked sad. The king asked, why do you look so sad? You're not sick, so it must be some deep inner grief. At this, I became very fearful. As I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why shouldn't I look sad when the city, the place where my ancestors' tombs are, lies in ruins, and its gates are completely burned up? The king asked me, what is it you want? What is it you want? So that's, the king actually asked, what is it you want? Nehemiah gives the king an extensive shopping list, and you can read it. Not only he asked for permission to build the wall of Jerusalem, but he asked official permission to cross the borders, a military escort, and finances and wood from the king's forest. You know, it's he asked a kingly gift. It's like the story I told you one time of the man who came to Alexander the Great and asked him for a fortune of money. And Alexander's counselor said, "Hey, you can't do that. You can't give him what he asked. If you do that, everybody's going to come to you." But Alexander said, No, I'm going to give it to him. He asked me for something that only a king can give. I will act like a king and give him a gift that only a king can give. So basically, when Nehemiah asked for this big thing, he was actually honoring the king. And I think this is a lesson of faith. We need to have faith to ask our King of Kings for big things. When we're afraid to do so, we shame him. He is the King of Kings. He owns the sheep, the flocks on 1,000 hills, as well as the gold and the silver in them too. So Nehemiah got all that he asked and more. Wow. He thought he was going to get his head cut off, but actually. So Nehemiah gets ready to go to Jerusalem. He's got his letters from the king. He's got his military escort. He's got his wood and everything that he needs to do a great job to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. You see, today we don't have walls in our cities. You know, because since the invention of the airplane, the walls are irrelevant. But until then, your walls was your protection. You know, and a city without walls could not even be considered a city. You build the walls first. You build the wall, you have a city. That's it. A city is something that is defensible. You know, if it's not defensible, it's not a city. Actually, just as a little segue here, you know, there is a big dispute with Judea and Samaria that is considered by the UN occupied territory. You know, but my cousin who lives there said, no, these are the liberated territories. You know, but the reason why Israel does not yield to that idea that they are occupied territory and they should return is because of the very UN resolution that was passed in 1948, which said that Israel was given the right to exist with defensible borders. With defensible borders. And you see, Israel is like that. And if you take Judea and Samaria, it cuts a big part of the east. And that little space that's left is not defensible. It's actually a trap. There's mountains, that's it, done. You know. So in 1948, the UN passed a resolution that says defensible. So a city, to be a city, has to be defensible. A country, to be a country, has to be defensible. So, but at first Nehemiah goes, and here's what it says in Nehemiah 2:12. He arrives and he got up during the night. I had a few men with me. I hadn't told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Yerushalayim. It's 2:12 to 16. I went out by night through the valley gate to the dragon well. So it says where he goes. Basically, he goes and investigates at night. What's the state of the nation? What is he going to do? Then after he saw everything, he made his declaration. He said, you see what a state we're in, how Yerushalayim lies in ruins, with its gates burned up. Come, let's rebuild the wall of Yerushalayim so that we won't continue in disgrace. And he also told them of the gracious hand of my God that had been on me, or so what the king has said to me. So he says, look, you guys, we're not even a city. We have been given freedom. We can do that. Let's build it. And you know what? Look, I got letters from the king. I can take all the wood I want from his forest. I've got a military army. I've got his permission. He sent me to do that. And they say, okay, let's start building at once. Wow. You know, first he investigated, he didn't want to get his report from what somebody told him. He said, oh, Jerusalem is in ruins, First he went to make sure, and he saw, oh my gosh, it's even worse than I was told. So he went and he rallied the troops, and they said, yes, let's do it. Okay, we're doing great, okay? What happens next? What happens next? In Nehemiah 2:19, when Sanballat the Horoni and Tobiah the servant, the Ammoni, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they began mocking us and jeering. So these people were not Judeans. These people were actually Samaritans. And when after the first king Nebuchadnezzar took all the exiles of Judea, the Samaritans and the Edomites said, yes, no, we rule the place. And they started ruling over the whole area. You see what I mean? So for them, Nehemiah was bad news. They said, oh no, Nehemiah. So they're going to try to do something. Technically, there's nothing they could do. He had a letter from the king. Period. Okay, we got to always remember he had a letter from the king. But they're going to give him certain tests and trials. You see, to have permission from the king is not enough. Okay? Permission from the king is not enough. Even permission from God is not enough. If you remember the story of Abraham, God told him, hey, leave your place and go to this place I showed you here, right? Somebody else lives there. He could have said, okay, Mr. Canaanite, I understand you've been living here, but my God, he told me that this was my place now. So can you please move out? Mr. Canaanite was waiting with him. Bow and arrow. What did Abraham do? He went to Egypt. He was not going to do it by force. If God is going to do it, he's going to do it. That's called faith. So here, these Samaritans, these people who had taken advantage over the Judean demise, they said to him, what are you doing? Are you going to rebel against the king? So, this is test number one. You see, Nehemiah had the permission, but he was going to be tested. His resolve was going to be tested by people. Whenever God tells us to do something, our resolve gets tested. Are you tracking with me so far what I'm doing? Even when God tells us to do something, something's going to come to test us. Okay? So here's the first one. These guys come to Nehemiah and says, well, what is this you're doing? Are you going to rebel against the king? Well, he's got letters of permission. What's this accusation? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So, sometimes we can doubt what Hashem tells us to do. But we need to make sure he tells us to do something. In this case, us when we have instructions from Hashem, sometimes we can say, oh, did you really say that? I don't know. It's actually a good state of mind to not be always so sure of ourselves as far as Hashem is concerned. It's actually good, But there was no doubt. There was no doubt. He had a letter from the king. He's like, yeah. And these guys come, hey, you're rebelling against the king. So, in this case, Nehemiah did not even have to engage in the conversation. So what did he do? He answered them, "The God of heaven will enable us to succeed. Therefore, we and his servants, we set about rebuilding." He did not even answer the question. It was not even worth a dignified answer. He had a letter from the king. So he said, "We're getting ready to build." But he says, "You have no share, right, or history to commemorate in Jerusalem. You can be against us, but after we've rebuilt, you have no share with us." And on that, this is all in Nehemiah 2, on that the Judeans organized themselves to build side by side. You can read, it's very nice how it's written. They build this team here and side by side. You know, it's like, that's how you build a wall, break after break. There was family to family, side by side. And it's all very well organized. It's a very good sample of how to build something in an orderly fashion. And they had a leader. His name was Nehemiah. And Nehemiah had a leader. His name was God. You know? Okay, so that was test number 1. Nehemiah 1:30. He did not even dignify them with an answer. Number 2. So the first one was doubt. Doubt. The second one is mocking, contempt. And we find it in Nehemiah 4, verses 1 through 3. Where it says, "Greatly enraged, he ridiculed." When that failed, they tried mocking the Judeans for their efforts. They said, "What are these pathetic Judeans doing? Are they going to rebuild anything they want? Are they going to sacrifice? Are they going to finish today?" Look at the questions. What are they building? What is this pathetic people? What do they think they're doing? Can they even build something? You know, are they going to eventually sacrifice at the temple? Are they going to finish? Are they going to recover useful stones from the piles of rubble? Maybe they were not professional builders, but they were doing something, you know. And Tobiah the Ammoni was with him, and he said, "Whatever they're rebuilding, even if fox went up, he'll knock their stone wall down." Ha ha ha! They were mocking them. And they probably were not doing a perfect job. You know, when they were finished with that, in the end, they built a second temple. When they finished the second temple, they cried because it was not as good as the first one. You know. But who asked for perfection? You know, I know in our lives, Hashem called us to do a lot of things. And in everything we did, and still do, we just mumble through. We fumble through and mumble through too. You know, we fumble through because really we have no training in anything. We try, we do the best we can, and Hashem does the rest. You know, but if He said to do it, okay, we'll do it. He said, "Well, do a CD, sings us sing." I'm kidding. You know, we don't even know what a studio looks like. It's like, you know, so it's like. They were doing the best they could, and these professionals, these guys who were rich, who had the money, who maybe had the equipment to help them, instead of helping, they were mocking them. They had the rich and the powerful who could really help them make a difference by helping, mocking them. You know, it's terrible. It can be all these things, you know. First the doubt, then the mocking. I mean, Nehemiah was a human being. All this people, you get discouraged. It hits you. You can stand against it with ooh, you know. But how did he react? How did he react to that one? Okay, did he throw stones at them? You know, did he throw arrows at them? Did he write on his Facebook, did he take time to respond? No, it says, he actually prayed. He said, "God, listen, We are being treated with contempt. Turn back their jeers on their own heads. Give them over to be plundered in the land of exile. Don't cover their guilt. Don't let their sin be wiped out from before you, because they have insulted the builders to their face. He was not going to dignify nor validate the insults by responding or even investing an ounce of energy against them. That would be energy wasted. He prayed. He prayed to hear those people who tell him, hey, you can't do this. There's people who tell him, hey, you don't know how to do it. We know how to do it better. You don't know. So that's what he did. But what they did, they kept building. They kept building. And what was the key to their progress? It says, so we kept building the wall, which was soon joined together. Wow, once you have the two parts joining together, it's great. We kept building what was soon joined together to half its height all the way around. Woo! Why? Because the people worked with a will. Maybe they didn't have the right tools. Maybe they didn't have the right technology. Maybe they didn't have the right methods. Maybe they didn't have the money. But they worked with a will. And when you have the will, watch out. No one can stop the person with the will of God's will on their side. So third test, fear. So we had doubt. Did the king really ask me to do that? Mocking. What you was thinking doing? Fear. Nehemiah 4:7-8. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonim, and the Ashdodim heard that the repairs on the walls of Jerusalem were going forward, and the breaks were being filled in, they became very angry. All of them together plotted to come and fight against Jerusalem and thus throw us into confusion. So after doubt and mockery failed, they tried fear. A plot of an attack. They're going to attack us. Oh no! Maybe we should stop building and time. We can't afford it. What are we going to do? What did Nehemiah do? Here's what he did. Verses 4:9-13. However, we prayed to our God, and because of them, organized a watch against them day and night. Yehuda was saying, the strength of the people who carry loads away is starting to fail, and there is so much rubble that we can't build a wall. Our enemies were saying they won't know or see anything until we have already infiltrated them and begin killing them and stopping the work. So there was the work was too big for them, basically. Makes me think a little bit like what we're trying to build on. Probably. It's like, we know nothing. It's too big for us. Even Ron says it's too big. But we do what we can. So, and then they stood a chance of being infiltrated. And even it says, and even the Judeans living near them came and must have said to us 10 times, from every place you must come back to us. So in the lower part of the place behind the wall are stationed men according to their families with their sword and spears piercing them. So here there was this big problems. Too much work, too much rubble, a potential attack from the enemy, and even all the Judeans, they said, some people were saying, you need to stop this. We don't want to have war. We're not ready for war. So Nehemiah stayed in prayer, and he took steps to protect his flock. He made people fight He made people station according to their families. You know, that was smart. You may not fight for your neighbor, but you're going to fight for your family. You know, by families, and at least if something happens. So he was trusting God, but he was also being wise. Okay, he was also being wise. You know, so and he noticed also that their strength was failing. So that's the question. So failing strength can be something physical, but you know, there's a little proverb that says, it's not about the dog in the fight, it's about the fight in the dog. You know? So what he did in verse 4:14, after inspecting them, I stood up and addressed the nobles, leaders, and the rest of the people, and said, don't be afraid of them. Remember Adonai, who is great and fearful, and fight for your brothers, sons, and daughters, wives, and home. He had them working by families. You know, he says, don't be afraid. You know, yeah, the work we have to do, but these guys, don't be afraid. You know, Adonai is great and fearful. Fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your home. So he gives them a pep talk, a big speech. You know, he encouraged them. He organized them to watch over each other. So that was his third test, fear. And he went through that too. He encouraged them. And then he says, he organized them. He said from verses 16 through 21, from then on, half of my men will do the work, and half of them held the spear, shields, bow, and armor, while the leaders stood guards behind the entire house of Judah. So he was going to divide his crew. Half work, half hold the weapon. You know, there's even a place I think told him, you work with your spear on your side. You know, and it reminds me of how Israel was started in 1947, 48. They started the kibbutz, you know, and in the kibbutz, nobody earned money, but everybody played a role. And in the kibbutz, there were some people plowing the field, working, while the other guys were watching the kibbutz because they were always subject to attack. You know, and everybody gathered, not just the guy who did the harvest ate, and the guy who held the sword to keep everybody safe didn't eat. No, it's the same idea. And then he says, when you hear the sound of the shofar, come to that place to us. So they organize the calling fee. If there's a problem, here, that's where you come. We'll blow the shofar. And then he says, our God will fight for us. So by reminding them of God, organizing them, and taking proper, specific steps for their life, he was able to get them back to work. And it says, so we kept doing the work. Half of them held spears from daybreak until the stars appeared. So that's how you fight fear. You know, I used to go door to door, and the big enemy of door to door, especially in countryside houses, in neighborhoods, the big enemy of the door to door guy is the dog. You know, it's the dog. And I learned to handle dogs. You know, and what I figured out is that no matter how big the dog, a big Doberman, no matter how big or small, no matter how angry or loud, the worst thing I can do is turn around and run. He's got 4 legs, I got 2. But the best thing I can do is to face him straight in the eyes. Forward. Would you? You know. If you do that, the dog will go, you know, and it happened to me, you know, one time I remember I had 2 big Doberman coming to me, you know, and the lady, she was kind of calling them halfway. She was, she was halfway calling, "Now come back!" You know. And we thought, oh my gosh. I was not unrealistic. I knew, I'm going to get them out of here. You know. But I said, come on. And as they arrived towards me, so they're not afraid of me by being tall. I'm not tall compared to that. You know, I went like this, hey! And they started just sniffing, you know, they can go back. The lady was not happy. I didn't have anything. One time I had two of them come from two different sides. How do I do that? You know. Until the owner calls it back. But that's what you do with fear. You face it straight in the eyes. You know, because a dog comes to you because he's afraid of you. That's why. If you run, that's the proof you're an enemy, you're afraid. And because you're afraid, you're going to do something bad to him. You see, the fact that you run is the proof of what he's assuming. You know, if you're afraid, you're going to hurt him. You know, but if you show you're not afraid, he will say, "Oh, okay, big deal." And this is a bit the same with fear. It's a bit the same thing with fear. We can't feel fear. Who is it that said that? The biggest fear of all is fear itself. The biggest thing we should fear is fear itself. Anyway, so Nehemiah did not play with fear. Next test. Now this one's very interesting. Next test is greed. So here we have all these people in Jerusalem. Many of them had come back from Babylon. Some of them had stayed. Some were rich, some were poor. And you know, there is always the rich opportunists. The rich opportunists. You know, this is human nature. We see that even through COVID. It's disgusting how in the beginning of COVID, if you want to buy a little bottle of hand wine, they have $30, you know, masks, $30. And it's like, it's incredible, you know, how the opportunity, it's sick. And it was happening there. You know, what was happening is that many Judeans were making money by lending to their brothers and sisters with interest. And you can find it all, it's in Nehemiah 5. You can read it all yourself. You know. And as they were borrowing and lending, some people came to the point they could not repay their debts. The country was not protected. It was like difficult. So there were some people making a lot of money on their brothers and sisters. In the end, they couldn't get out of debt. They had to sell everything. And it became an issue because people were having so much financial trouble that they couldn't concentrate on building the wall. They had to take care of their family. But so some people were getting really rich, and the workers building the wall, that, you know, they were getting poor. So here's what Nehemiah said to them about this. He said, 5, 6 through 13, he says, "When I heard the outcry and the reason for it, I became very angry." He was mad at the situation. "I thought the matter over and then took issue with the nobles and rulers. I charged them, 'You are lending against pledges, everyone to his brother.'" And as we need to remember, this is forbidden in the Torah. It is forbidden to a Jew, between Jews, but also in many circles. It's forbidden to anyone. So I summoned the great assembly to deal with them, and I said to them, "We, to the limit of our ability, have redeemed our brothers, the Judeans, who sold themselves to the pagans." That's the Jubilee. "Now you are selling your own brothers, and we will have to buy them back." So here they were taken by pagans, and we redeemed them, and now we're having to redeem them from you, their brothers. This is terrible. They stayed silent. They couldn't think of anything to say. Nehemiah also said, "What you are doing is not good. You should be living in fear of our God, so that our pagan enemies won't have grounds for deriding us. Moreover, my brothers and my servants, I too have loaned them money and grain." So he said, "I give, Please let's stop making it so burdensome to go into debt. Please, today, give them back their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and homes, also the 100 pieces of silver and the grain, wine, and oil you demand from them as interest." They answered, "We will give it back. We will require nothing from them. Yes, we will do it, just as you say." Then I called it, but Nehemiah was not going to just take their word for it. The greedy is always greedy. Then I called the Kohanim and took an oath from them that they would do just as they promised. Shaking out the fold in my garment, I said, "May God thus shake every man." He said, "May God shake every man like this and make them empty." The whole assembly said, "Amen." And praised Adonai, and the people did as they had promised. So here we have the idea where capitalist greed was impairing the work of God. And they had to share. They had to share. They had to learn to do that. There is no place for this sort of thing. I don't know what name to give it. In God's word, it's forbidden. The same idea was essential to the survival of the early congregation, where they put all things common. If they would not have done that, if the rich would not have come and given everything they had to be shared among everybody, the congregation would not have gone on its feet. But it did. And then the disciples from the nations also helped Jerusalem. It's by sharing that the congregation prospers, by sharing and giving. Lending for interest is giving to whom we are expected to receive, which Yeshua said not to do. He said, "Give not to those from whom you are expected to receive, but give above and beyond what you can." Total opposite. This is very important. The Bible calls lending for interest oppressing the poor, and there are some very hard punishments in the Torah for those who oppress the poor. So this was the next enemy. This enemy was from within, greed. Test number 5, distraction. Nehemiah 6:1-2. When it was reported to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall, and that not a single gap was left in it. So it was not high, but it was closed. That's the main thing. So they were successful, although up to that time I had not yet set up the doors and the gateways. Sanballat and Geshem sent me a message which says, "Come, let's meet together in one of the villages, the one in Ono Valley." But they were planning to do me harm. So they won't have a meeting about the issue. Again, what meeting do they need to have? Nehemiah's got his orders from the king. Why does he even need to talk with them? He doesn't need their permission. His permission comes from the king. Just like we have our assignment from the king too. How did he handle that? Nehemiah 6:3-4. So I sent them messengers with this message. "I'm too busy with important work to come down. Why should the work stop while I leave to come talk to you? I'm doing a great work. I don't have time to just have a fat and argue with you. I have my orders from my king. Why should I spend the time that my king wants me to do a job and give it to you? I'll be actually stealing from my king. You have no power here. I'm doing a great job. I don't have time to talk." that's what the enemy is. Let's talk about this. What is there to talk about? So again, Nehemiah, he got his orders. Why waste time? So that was distraction. Are you tracking with me there? There's 7 of them. We're almost finished. Test 6, vilifying lies. Nehemiah 6, 5 and 6. So now they're going to send him a letter, and in the letter is written, "It is reported among the nations," and Geshem says it too. We heard on YouTube and Facebook, and actually this big guy who's actually your enemy, but he says it too, that you and the Judeans are planning a revolt, that this is why we are rebuilding the wall, and that you intend to be their king. Now, nobody could be claimed king. I mean, even when Ahasuerus sent the Jews back, he did not allow Israel to have a king. He had a governor, not a king. If you declare yourself king, you're a traitor. That was the accusation that they put on Yeshua. The king of the Jews. If you do that, you're a traitor to the Roman Empire. So they were giving him a very big political accusation. We know what you're doing. You're going to make yourself king. And there was a letter. They put it in the letter, and Nehemiah could think, well, if that letter goes to Ahasuerus, I'm going to have a problem. So now we have lies. And lies is difficult. Lies of conspiracy, pride, really, that he was just proud and was trying to get glory for himself, leadership. But actually, he was not. He was doing his job for his king, Ahasuerus. But if you're a person that prides himself of living by virtue, humility, and all that, to be accused of pride and of this sort of thing, it's really hard. It's really hard, and so it must have been really tough for him there. It hurts. So I'm just trying to do my job. What are these people fighting me for? And they're just, they are rude. But again, at that time, we got to suck it up and face up this wild accusation of pride, knowing that these are, again, just distractions designed to sap us of our strength and courage and time. So Nehemiah answers that letter. Again, he's not dignifying them with any answer. He says, maybe a little bit. He says, nothing like what you're saying is being done. You're making it all up in your head. And you got to think too. They didn't just give him the letter. Probably there was big rumors going on that they spread among the people. It's like he had to fight probably people. Gossip. There's so. It's like today. There's so much stuff going on. I don't know what's true or not. So, but again, he says, nothing like what you're saying is being done. You're making it all up in your head. They were just all trying to scare us, thinking this will sap their strength, keep them from working. But now, he prays again. What does he pray? God, increase my strength. The last one, false prophecy. Now, if you're a person who believes in God, if somebody comes to me with something outlandish, and they say, God said to them, and they ask my opinion, says, what opinion is that to give? God told you. And most of the time it didn't. It's like, I'm not going to, I want to give an example in a very generic quote. No, I'm not going to.
There's a lot of that.
So in 6:10 it says, one day when I went to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of Meheltavel, where he was confined, he said, let's meet together in the house of God, inside the temple. Let's shut the doors of the temple. They're going to come and assassinate you. They'll come at night to kill you. He says, you know, Nehemiah, you've made too many enemies here. We're going to go hide in the temple. You got to stop. You got to lay low for a while. They're going to kill you. What does Nehemiah do? What did he do? Oh, okay, here we go. He said, should a man like me run away? Can a man like me go to the temple to save his life? I refuse to go in. You know, I refuse to go in. Then he says, then I realized that God had not sent him, that he was making this prophecy against me, and that Tobiah and Sanballat had bribed him to say. You know, prophecies is really tricky. I don't know if you know, but there is a verse in the Bible. There's two places. One time Jeremiah comes to the king. King had a whole bunch of prophets around him telling, oh yes, the Babylonians are coming. You're going to whip the tuchas. You know, you're going to win the war and everything. And then the king asks Jeremiah. Jeremiah says, and he put a couple of oxen yoke on it. He says, this is what the Lord said. You know, put your neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon and live. If you make war against him, you'll die. I'm sending him to punish you. And one other prophet says, hear what the Lord showed me. And he took Jeremiah's yoke and broke it. He said, the Lord showed me this and this. He gives a whole prophecy. You can read it in Jeremiah or in Chronicles. But, okay. Then Jeremiah said, well, you took off the people's yoke of wood, but you've given them yoke of iron. A prophet, hear what the Lord showed me about your prophecy, Jeremiah. And the king is there, going, oh, what am I going to do with this guy? You know. But the big group of prophets, they were eating from the table of the king, and he liked them because they told him everything he wanted to hear. You great king. Jeremiah told him what you can. There is even another story where a prophet, I think his name was Micah, where the Lord wanted a king to go to war, you know, but he wouldn't go. I think it's Jehoshaphat, I'm not sure. I think it's Jehoshaphat. He wanted a king to, but he wouldn't go. And Micah, I think that prophet was Micah, another one of the book of Micah, or maybe the same, I don't know. He asked the Lord, how shall I convince the king to go to war, something like that. The Lord said, I will send a lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets to tell the king, yeah, go to war. Prophecy is really serious. You know, prophecy is very, those stories are really, oh boy, I don't want to do a prophecy. I think that's the best attitude. It's like, woo. It's like, it's very, but here, Nehemiah knew how to deal with this. He says, you know, then you realize that he was making a false prophecy against him, and that Tobiah and Sanballat bribed him to say it. Bribed, that's terrible. That's the sin of Balaam, to be bribed to prophesy something. He had been hired to frighten me into following his suggestion and thus sin, so they would have material for their unfavorable report about me and could taunt me with it. What did Nehemiah do? He prayed. God, remember Tobiah and Sanballat according to their deed, and the prophet, Adiah, and the other prophets trying to intimidate me. So he said, he's not going to even go fight against them or try to hold a big Facebook conversation or whatever. Just say, God's going to remember it. And what was the result in the end? The war was finished in the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. In 52 days, a month and a half about. When all our enemies heard about it, and the surrounding nations became afraid, our enemies' self-esteem fell severely. Because they realized that this work had been accomplished by our God. Against all odds, they made it. By fighting against this effort, they were fighting against God Himself. And they must have gone, oops. We too are building walls. We build a wall, not a wall that excludes people. We're building a wall that includes people. You know? We're building the kingdom. Stone by stone. Brick by brick. Door by door. Window by window. And that's what we're doing when we get together, when we study the Torah, when we fellowship, when we are a good sample, when we apply ourselves the virtue taught to us by Yeshua and by the Torah, even when it hurts us. We're building the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Abba Father, we pray that you help us in our efforts to build the kingdom. Help us as we do so to recognize all the efforts of the enemies through fear, distraction, greed, mockery, doubt. Help us to recognize them and not even dignify them with answers. Help us to know that we cannot come down because we have a great work to do. B'Shem Yeshua Mashiach, Amen.